Hey everyone, TJ All's I-45 now. Continuing our ongoing coverage of the elections of 2017. We have the November 7th date coming up for the elections, and obviously the county's $80 million bond proposals. There's 3 issues on the ballots, proposal A, B, and C. And you heard us talk with County Commissioner Ken Clark about this. He is a proponent of those bond issues. And now we're talking with Tax Assessor, Galveston County Tax Assessor Cheryl Johnson, who would be characterized as probably a vocal, I don't know, is an opponent fair in this point?
Opponent's probably fair,
okay.
yes.
In this, and to give folks an idea of the other side of things,
Yes.
You've been looking into this early on. First, let's just talk about, give me an overview of how you look at this bond proposal, the 3 different ballot propositions that are on the bond proposal for this election.
I see this as the wrong thing at the wrong time. When they called this election in August, it was pre-Harvey. And so at that time, 50 some odd million dollars worth of roads might have been a very important thing. But today, our concerns are flood and our concerns are recovery. If it was me, I would have done everything I could to take this off the ballot.
Let me ask you though, because you said now it's not the right things. How about if Harvey had never hit and that was put on? How would you have a different approach to that, or
well,
pretty much
probably, except my opinion, still the bond. I was opposed to the bond from the outset because it's the wrong time. In November constitutional elections, in any given year, it's 3, 4, 5%. Voter turnout is an issue, not voter registration so much as voter turnout. So you have a constitutional election, nobody shows up, except in the 90s when we had the 10% appraisal cap. And in 2015, we had the League City Municipal District, the MDD. We had KEMA, what was their traffic system.
Right.
And Clear Lake Shores was increasing their tax rate. And then we had the Tech City ISD TRE. We had the Friendswood tax rate. So at that time, the only time people come out for elections in November, constitutional, is when money's on the table. And of course, they came out for the constitutional because they were increasing their homestead exemption.
Gotcha. All right. One of the big issues you were talking about, and as we're doing this interview on a Tuesday afternoon, right after Commissioners Court met yesterday, as we talk about this, the Commissioners Court voted down something you've been pushing, which is the reappraisal, the emergency reappraisal of properties after Hurricane Harvey. You have said this is a key issue for this. Talk about that, because the one thing you've been questioning is saying, okay, if you're not going to do reappraisal, why should we trust you with our money afterwards? But let's talk about how you see that connected to this bond proposal.
Well, I wasn't outwardly spoken against the bond until we exhausted whether the commissioners were going to do disaster reappraisal, because I didn't want to sour that. And did one have to do with the other? Yes. By them saying no to the 20,000 victims of Harvey, what they're saying is we're not going to pay $22 to help you. And so if you're not going to give goodwill, and if it was like Nick Long said, symbolic, which I don't feel that way, but if that's all it was, then you're not willing to give goodwill, but you want goodwill. So if you want people, and I told them several weeks ago in the workshop, you're asking people to vote for your bond and you're not going to help them, that's the wrong message to send. And I've heard all sorts of things. I heard yesterday afternoon when I walked out of that room, somebody said, well, Cheryl, it's not that much money. And I am so over people saying it's not that much money. $100 to a family who's lost everything would put school lunches on the table for 2 children for a month. And so you can't minimize the value of $100. And it's not $100 just this year. It would have been $100 in 2017. Then it would have been taking that 10% appraisal cap down. So it would have been lower taxation next year and the year after that. So in the end, it could have been $1,000 to some of these families. That's a lot of money.
And that's the argument you've been making.
Yes.
I want to clarify that here. One, just when you're talking about Nick Long, she's talking about League City Councilman Nick Long.
Yes.
The City Council in League City also voted not to go forward with the reappraisal. The County Commissioners also did the same thing on Monday. But this isn't for you about the immediate savings that could come for that, right? It is about, because folks may not understand, that reappraisal setting the bar. Once it's gone lower, there's a certain cap on homestead exemptions out there. You can't go above the
Right.
10% level.
Right.
Is that, and so in the long term, it has a big effect.
Yes.
As we get closer to January. Is that's
Right,
your argument?
absolutely, and particularly for homeowners. Now, for our businesses, most of the business people that I know, they're doing everything in their power right now to get their businesses back open.
Right.
So for somebody who lost every bit of their inventory, they're still gonna have to pay me on that full inventory. They don't even have anything to sell anymore. So who's gonna help the businesses? And without this, there will be no help for the businesses.
And I think, and that's probably what's going to be getting lost in this.
Yes.
Is that the business side of things, that how much inventory you had on the floor
Right.
in January, now that inventory is all washed
It's all
out.
gone.
Whether it's vehicles at auto dealerships.
Right.
Or clothing in a store that you may have.
Antiques.
Antiques or
Yes.
anything you sell from there.
Restaurant
And-
equipment.
And that hadn't been addressed a whole lot because that would be part, it's not just residentials
Right.
that would be reappraised on
Right.
that.
And you look at a community like Dickinson, and their businesses were wiped out. How many of those businesses are gonna reopen? How many of those businesses are gonna get a tax bill from me this week? Every single one of them. Every single one of them.
Has anyone actually adopted the reappraisal, emergency reappraisal?
Not in our
the
county.
Not
No,
anywhere.
we've had 12 governments in the state of Texas who have done so, but nobody in Galveston County.
Gotcha. What's your biggest complaint about this bond proposal? I know you said earlier about the timing, and that just at the wrong time.
Yeah,
But
initially it
what are
was
your
the
biggest
timing.
issues with it?
Initially it was the timing, but secondly, it's the lack of compassion that was displayed yesterday. It's the wrong projects. If this $52 million in road projects was going to be Galveston County's commitment for the Ike Dike, I'd be the first person in line voting for it. If it was about $50 million in flood control projects, maybe I would be for it. But I'm not even certain that I could be for it in that instance, because the last time we gave county commissioners money for floods, they gave it to Harris County. So Harris County Flood Control takes 8 to 10 million. I haven't been able to quite get down which figure that is. So let's say 9. They get $9 million of revenue that the Commissioners Court told us in 2008 they were going to spend for flood control. They give it to them. They dig a couple of big holes up in Harris County. Sagemont water's level was dropped by 4 feet. Clear Creek by 6 inches to a foot. And that's according to media reports, because nobody really knows, because nobody has done an engineering study. So should we trust them with flood money? I don't. And so the 6 million, if anybody is really sweating, there was a former Galveston County employee reached out to me and said, how can you be against this? We need those flood projects. Well, so I looked at the flood projects. So we've got Highland Bayou slope stability for 1.5 million. We can't take the county facilities department or road and bridge and scrape that slope right now without 1.5 million. We can't take the 3 million. I'm not certain I have a problem with the 3 million for the regional detention in Dickinson.
Right.
But this
Which has been on the discussed for
Right.
years and years and years.
Right, but the Dickinson Steering Committee looked at that. Well, where's the Galveston County Consolidated Drainage District, who, by the way, is taxing us every single year? They're partly responsible for Dickinson Bayou. They're also partly responsible, they're fully responsible for Clear Creek. So why aren't they at the table helping with that? Okay, I feel like they should be. They're taxing people for that. Then they had Cloud Bayou in here, Santa Fe, Altaloma. They suffered floodwaters. It's not funded. So it's not funded at all. So Santa Fe folks, forget it. There's nothing in here for you. Maybe a road project. And then the rest is the ditch. They're going to fund a pipeline relocation. Why aren't you going to that pipeline company and saying relocate that pipeline? Because it's in the way of our drainage. So I do believe that they're spending this money wrongly, and they have reserves that they could be using for this. Now, they said, well, we've got to do this now. We've got the Pelican Island Bridge. They have $84 million in reserves. Put the $5 million on the table, because if not a rainy day, what are the reserves for?
And we should point out and we're going to address the Pelican Island a little bit more, that $5 million is for redoing the Pelican Island Bridge that connects Galveston Island with Pelican Island, which has Texas A&M, a lot of industrial properties owned by the Port of Houston and the Port of Galveston over there. It's seen as a big economic development project. One, I know you're in favor of, to see develop over there, and that project has been, but you're just saying, why put it in here? And has been used as the timing mechanism for why it's going now instead of May, for example.
But the state, TxDOT reached out to the county months ago and said, hey, if you want our money, you're going to have to answer some questions. You're going to have to come up to the table. They could have stepped up to the plate right then and said, we're serious about doing this. This is important to our county. But you know, the other side of this is the City of Houston or Port of Houston owns a lot of that property. If don't you think that they have some economic benefit to be gained here? So why aren't we going to them? If we could, let me go back to the flooding issue. You know what I'd like to see done with that money? I'd like to see somebody sue the Harris County Flood Control, Harris County, Houston, anybody north of us who is dumping all that water on us. Because at some point in time, the legislature or somebody's going to have to address the issue that we are being flooded because of runoff from upstream. So how do we stop that?
And I should know, and that's an issue, quite frankly, for you personally. Your husband, Don, has been looking at it for years of, in Brazoria County, the widening of Clear Creek as it came down. So basically, they did a lot of widening in Brazoria County, which made able to handle more water, but it was putting it down into a bottleneck. And it goes into a bigger issue that's not part of this, which goes into the discussion of when people take a look at flood control issues, they only look in their one area and they don't look at the deep, like, okay, the water's coming from another direction. And that is an issue that probably needs, I know the Galveston Bay Foundation for years has looked at that. On the drainage projects, County Commissioner Ken Clark and County Commissioner Darrell Apfel, in talking with them at the League City Forum that was hosted last week, they had said, we'll be able to take this now, we'll be able to take this $6 million and possibly now apply it not only to these projects, but then work with FEMA emergency that'll come down and other federal disaster and basically make it tenfold in some cases. Do you buy that argument at all? And then again, that's a timing thing. When this went on the ballot, that wasn't an issue, but now they're using that.
Was it 2000 or 2002 when Jim Yarborough, as the county judge, was selling a big bond? And maybe it was the 2008 bond.
It was right after Ike.
And he said, for every $1 million we spend, or every $10 million, TxDOT's going to chip in, the feds are going to chip in. So it was very clearly spelled out. There was a well-laid plan. And you know, I have a history of not supporting things that we rush into. And so I feel like that if you're going to get a commitment from the federal government, or if you're going to get a commitment from the state of Texas, tell me that in advance. Don't say, hey, you know, if we're lucky, we're going to get this, because government isn't about luck, it's about planning.
And so not having those details, even though it's been touted as, not having those details is a concern for you.
Right.
How about I think the kind of the biggest allegation that, not allegation or complaint you've had is about that this is basically a pre-primary gift. We can't ignore the primaries, which actually, quite frankly, determine the elections in this county. Next year. Some commissioners are on the ballot next year. And you've said that this is the way you looked at it. You called it cherry picking of different projects to be able to gain votes. Talk about where that's coming from and how you look at that.
Engineers are huge contributors to county commissioner races, huge contributors. And they've started getting involved in some of the cities, particularly like League City, for example. They've started to get involved in those elections where there's a lot of contracts to be let. And so the engineers have already funded approximately 51% of the county judges' campaign contributions, just the engineering firms. If you throw in the architects and you throw in all the county vendors, then that's well over 70% of his contributions. And if anybody wants that information, you can email the county clerk's office and you can get those images. I reviewed 145 images.
And to be fair to everyone here, while you're saying that, I have myself have not verified this.
I've got the images. I
got
can send it to you, right.
But I'm just going to say, I have myself not verified this. This is what, but the forum here is a GalView a platform. So, all right, and so the engineering firms,
that's if they had waited until May, when the city elections are a far greater turnout. I've got some stats here somewhere. If you look at the city elections, much better turnout than a constitutional election. If you look at then the governors, even the governor's election isn't that big, but it's twice to 3 times what we usually see in a constitutional. So why don't you put this on the ballot at a time when it's not specifically going to get you contributions in goodwill from the engineering firms, but it's going to be after your election. So let's run an honest campaign. Let's ask the voters to contribute to your campaign, not the contractors, not the engineering firms. And I think that's more fair, because otherwise all we have is an election that's going to be pay for play. That's it.
And to be fair, and we'll come back to that. I know you want to go back to it, but to be fair, though, quite frankly, in any election, folks that have interest within a government entity are going to donate to campaigns that they think are beneficial to them. It's not saying there's not necessarily a confirmation these are always a tit for tat thing, but I know people talk about that, and the optics are not might be the best, because the engineering firms that make the most donations tend
And
to get the
Dannenbaum's
contracts.
kind of getting into some trouble for
So,
that right
yeah,
now.
so those are the things. You wanted to go back on an
Yes,
issue
I
we were
do.
talking about before.
The other issue is when this bond was being sold, and you and I go way back, so so you know how I am on this. The governments used to be able to get away, or politicians used to get away with saying, don't worry, we're going to do this, and we haven't increased your taxes. Well, you didn't have to increase my taxes because the appraisal district has increased my value. So when the county judge and Ken Clark and even, bless his heart, Commissioner Outfeld, I'll teach him yet, that you just got to educate these folks that if you're not increasing taxes like they're saying on this bond, it means you're not lowering them either. And so what Mark has continuously said, and sadly, Galveston Daily News articles, well, we're gonna cover the tax cost with the 3% increase in values that's coming down the pike. Well, I don't think we're gonna see a 3% increase in values this year. So this very next year, after they didn't do disaster reappraisal and they start issuing these bonds, the tax rate's gonna have to go up to pay for them. And so here, you didn't give them a tax break, you're gonna have this bond, you promised no tax increase, now you're gonna have to increase the taxes, because guess what, the values didn't go up. So the CAD, you're not gonna be able to hide behind the CAD values.
And to clarify that, though, from what Commissioner Clark has told us, that 3% what they're talking about is a new added value to, not an existing structure
Yes,
or existing
yes.
business.
That's-
This is about new construction, because we have seen, particularly in the North County, that's his answer.
That might be his answer, but it's not new improvements. And right now, I'm not sure contractors are even able to develop the new improvements at the rate. Right now, everybody's rebuilding. So as long as those rebuilds aren't classified as new improvements, we'll be good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what I've heard, and I don't know what Commissioner Clark has said, what the county judge has said, is the values overall are going up 3%, and they are. They're actually going up more than that. So if as those values go up, they've been able to drop that tax rate. But now they're going to use that increase to cover this. Well, guess what? No increase, potentially.
Right. No decrease.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Yeah,
there's
so-
not going to be the market values. If there's new improvement values coming onto the book, the decrease in values resulting from the Harvey damage is going to offset that. So I think we're going to have a flat tax base, just like we did. Now, I don't think we're going to have the same. We lost $2 billion in value after Ike. I think that this is going to be less than that, but it's going to take years for us to build back up to the current level.
Gotcha. Is there anything within this bond proposal you support, of any of the projects you've seen or any of the approaches?
No, if I could take that flood control project and just cut it down to the $3 million for Dickinson Bayou, that would probably be the one thing that I would do, but I can't do that. So I'd say if anybody is going to vote for anything, stick to the 7.5% piece of this, which is the $6 million bond for drainage, and let's hope that the message therefore is sent that the drainage is the important issue for us. We're concerned about flooding. So address flooding, and then we'll talk about these other things in the future.
And you should be able to note for folks that when you haven't seen your ballot yet, there's proposal A, which is
52 million for
the
roads.
roads. Proposal B, which is county facility upgrades.
Yes.
And then C is the drainage. So you're saying, if anything, whether you're saying nothing. to all of them, but-
The county improvements, y'all have been in my League City office, and there's long lines. We're not gonna get anything out of that. So if you're expecting to walk into a tax office that has more workstations and more employees, ain't gonna happen. So what is gonna happen? Well, they've already taken a $600,000 building off the tax roll, so I'm sure they're gonna do something to that, turn it into some fancy conference center or something that the county can hold public meetings. That's not what we need. We don't need a facility to have meetings. We need larger county clerk's office, a larger courtroom for Kathleen McCumber, more space in my office. We got a new employee to add the tax office. There was no place to put them in League City. And so we couldn't even add a workstation to that facility to put more people up there. So I just don't think that they're focusing on the right thing. But pay for anything else you need with the reserves right now.
However, one part of that facility improvement is, and a big chunk of it, 6.7 million, is to create a larger and expanded medical examiner's office, which, if you talk to any law enforcement agency or the district attorney's office in here, has been, according to them, a vital need for many years. I mean, we have to look back to 2008 Harvey, where bodies that were coming in had to be put in refrigerated trucks, and to the point, the chillers are unreliable, the space is cramped there. Obviously, too, a lot of folks may not realize the Galveston County Medical Examiner's Office handles the forensic medical examinations for other counties, Fort Bend County, Matagorda County, Brazoria County, as part of it. But at least on that project, I mean, if it was separate maybe or something that could, I mean, that's a big chunk of that. Would you support
I would
that at
almost
least?
prefer that they have some of those things broken out, because if you need a new ME, okay, let me vote for the ME. But we're not getting to cherry pick what those final projects are. So the only other thing people can do is go to commissioners and say, okay, we're giving you this, but we want your focus to be here. They haven't listened to anything the voters have said, so why are they going to listen now?
Gotcha.
So don't trust them.
All right, so on this one, you said it, you don't trust them. So if there was the Cheryl Johnson bond proposal to address some of these needs, what would that, in overview, kind of look like?
Well, I'm waving on Pelican Island as an Aggie mom, I have to say, I'm going to help Texas A&M.
Right.
But, I would say rebuild that bridge because we want the bridge to be safe. But I really think they should have brought the navigation district in on that sooner. And I'd say let's look at, we've been told we need to come up with $50 million to move forward with the Ike Dike. So let's talk to the voters about that. And so if those are the issues that I believe right now we are set to possibly get some money from the feds for this very important coastal spine. Then I want them to start looking at pumps in the north end of the county and long pipelines to get that water out before it ever comes downstream.
So those would be the things you would look at.
Those would be the things that I would focus on.
And obviously, too, you talk about, Ike Dike and funding in there. Obviously, there's not a plan. While there's some coalition in our area, there is others
Coastal
that,
spine,
look at, they're different kind of out there, and as I said, it's become from Ike Dike to coastal spine to, the different names, but there's really nothing on the table yet to fund.
Right.
Is that part of your concern too, this bond?
Yes.
Going now is, why don't we wait until we see?
Let's have a plan, and what, I intend to talk to Judge Cox when he wins as county judge and tell him,
That's her political opinion, by the way. I should point out. Okay, gotcha.
Let's put together a task force. We did it after that failed bond in Clear Creek 23 years ago. We put together a Blue Ribbon Task Force, and we took the proponents, we took the opponents, we had administration represented, we took mayors from all across the area. We sat down, we met monthly, and actually almost every other week, put together a technology dream team that included people from JSC, and came up with, instead of $121 million, a $60 million bond that seated more students then. And by then, the interest rates had gone down, so instead of 21-cent increase on the tax rate, it was 5 cents on the tax rate. So let's take our time. History has shown that if you back off and really get creative, that we can come up with better solutions. And I think right now there's a lot of people out there that are ready to talk about flood solutions.
Well, and a flood like we had
Yes.
from Harvey, which obviously this storm was a lot different from Ike.
Oh,
And that
a lot different,
Storm
yes.
surge versus homes that have never flooded ever
Right.
being hit, and people realizing, even though there have been folks for over, like I said, the Galveston Bay Foundation, who has talked for years about we're building, we're really not looking at regional flood control, of taking more of a regional approach, is that folks probably are more, attuned
Yes.
to that to come in. I wonder though, too, is as you look at these issues come out, at some point, because let's address the elephant in the room, you're probably not the favorite person of the Commissioner's Court right now. And
I don't think a whole
that's
lot of them
reputation-
either, so.
It's been a reputation, quite frankly, that no matter what administration has been in
Yes.
there, you have gained over the
But
years.
commissioners have never gotten along with tax collectors. If you look across this, there's very few. Harris County, they didn't love Paul Betancourt.
Right.
They only loved the tax collector that they appointed. And so,
Right.
Trish got treated pretty good. She got appointed, and so, and I'm not, and I'm out there, and, I like to think of it, there's people that I don't agree with politically, but I don't dislike them. I don't dislike Mark Henry. He might be a nice guy, but the one time I held the olive branch out to him and said, hey, you got elected, I want you to be successful, let's work together. He wasn't willing to work together. So I'll work with anybody who wants to work. And I believe that the tax collector could bring a whole lot of benefit to Commissioner's Court.
Should it be something when these things come up, whether it's because you had this wide-ranging responsibility, not just on the County Commissioner's Court, obviously, but any entity who you think they should bring in your office on these things to help at least give them?
I think it would be beneficial. What about the permits for the 8-liners? Did you know that whenever they arrest somebody, the sheriff comes to my office? We're the only people who know where the machines are. because we issue the permits for those. And so when they decided that they were gonna set up this group and they were gonna limit the permitting, nobody ever came and talked to us. And we could tell them flaw after flaw after flaw in their plan, that, that let us collect the money, let us do the permitting. We're already doing that. We know who these people are, but nobody wanted to ask us, because how dare I know something? And so, we gotta get past that. If you wanna be successful, the mastermind theory works. I don't know it all, TJ. When you called me, I started digging through research, I started calling people, I started doing my homework. So, but to be successful, you surround yourself by people who know more than you do. And I do that in my office every day. And then understand every member of that team is essential. So if we all understand we're in this together and we're all necessary parts, we can be successful. We need to take every department head, we need to take every elected official in this county, we need to sit down together and say, y'all got elected, y'all are now serving the elected officials and, providing those support services. What do we need to do? Go out and talk to your constituencies, because they're all different. And come back to the table and tell us what they see, they want, they need. And so I think of course, we still have to get past that situation of civil debate and deliberation. Stop fighting with each other and start doing something, and remember, it's the people's government, it's not ours.
Let me go back to one more little topic, because we talked about the growth in the county, what's being, that the growth is gonna absorb this. We're not gonna see the increase on the tax rate from the what's normally the interest side, or the debt side of the tax rate. You take a look at these numbers, you see them coming in, as the appraisals have come in every year, you deal with it firsthand before it really gets to anybody else. What do you see as growth this next year, maybe 2 years, the way it's going? Because we've been so used to this skyrocketing big increases every single year. What do you see is coming down the pike?
I think that there's going to be somewhat of a metamorphosis, because the newer homes didn't necessarily flood. So I think that we need to start looking at builders and developers need to start looking at building differently, building higher. There's a little bit additional cost associated with that. I do believe we can see some value increases, perhaps from those properties that didn't flood. I think that there'll be a big turnaround or flipping of some of these other properties. I saw on the agenda yesterday that they had renewed their contract, or part of their contract, with the Texas Water Development Board. We need that severe repetitive loss program. It was good after Ike, and it'd be good today. They reinstituted a part of it, but we need to start looking at giving people money to raise some of these properties so we can get that value back on the book. So I think that needs to be the focus. The builders are still going to build homes, people still have to have housing, but I think people are going to be more cautious. I think there's going to be a little bit less money out there for a while. So I think it'll be a couple of years, but the good news is they're buying cars. And so we're going to see a huge boom and increase in taxes from that. The state government for sure. We're doing boats now. We're seeing the boat titles increase. Well, that's brought sales tax to the county they've never experienced before. So I think that we'll see some increases in some areas, but it's going to be different from what it's been in the past, at least for the short term.
So more on the purchasing of goods, the sales tax increase, than the ad valorem.
Absolutely.
So are you seeing, a flat overall in the county, a flat increase on property tax?
I believe
revenue,
you'll see
just a slight
the
increase?
values being somewhat flat. You'll have some of those values, some of those sales occurring, which is going to drive some of it up, but then you're going to have the other ones coming down. So you're going to see some areas of town radically hit. We're going to have to think differently about how that development's occurring. So I think there's just going to be a shift. As you said, areas flooded that have never flooded before.
Right.
So we're going to have to look at development differently. We don't necessarily want to turn properties back over to FEMA because they can never be developed, and then the government has to sit on them. But so perhaps those properties need to be merged with other properties, and those houses need to be raised and torn back down and higher, elevations established. So I think it's just going to be different. And you're right, this is so different from Ike, but Ike, for all of its damage to Bolivar Peninsula, that was a vast improvement for the peninsula. And it's fabulous what came back. And so we need to embrace the moving forward and just start looking at things differently. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, in general, I think it gives folks an idea of what we're looking at, because you see those numbers, and I think it's fair folks can understand, because economic growth in the area as part of this,
Yes.
of the bond proposal.
And so we're gonna see that 10% appraisal cap is gonna limit the return back on homesteads. I think that we'll see some other homes that will become homesteads, but they'll sell. They'll go on the market. I don't know, how that market's gonna turn around right now. I'm seeing people sell their homes to developers right now, or to investors who are gonna flip them, but are they gonna necessarily bring those houses back to the way they should be, or are we just gonna have a whole lot more rental property? We could see a whole bunch of subdivisions that are suddenly nothing but rental properties.
Right.
And so
It
that's
could
gonna be different too.
Which has a huge economic
Yes.
impact in itself. Thanks for coming on with us. I
Sure,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Cheryl
I
Johnson,
appreciate it.
the Galveston County Tax Assessor Collector, coming on with us today. And thanks, it was a last minute call to her as well as we were diving into this issue. So we're a little bit late, as we meant to have this a lot earlier but Harvey, I think, got us all back down.
That's okay.
Again, early voting has already begun. It's going to go until November the 3rd. Election day is November 7th. We'll have links on our website, on our site here, for you to go find where your polling locations are. And we're also going to be linking to Cheryl's Facebook page, where she has a lot of this stuff that she's putting out there for you to take a look as well. Thanks again for coming on with
Thank
us.
you.
I'm TJ Alls, I-45 Now.